Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, if you go down into the Tennessee woods today, you're in for a big surprise. For the past 4 years, Sullivan County, Tennessee has been locked in a legal battle with a company known as Endo Pharmaceuticals. In case you were wondering, Sullivan County is the seat of Kingsport, and Kingsport is where Candace took her daughter swimming shortly before she disappeared. This suit was filed in 2017 as Storbus versus Purdue and was the first lawsuit to include a newborn baby known as Baby Doe, born dependent on opioids, as a plaintiff. Just a few days ago, WJHL, the same local news agency reporting on the Wells case, reported on a $35 million settlement in the Baby Doe case. It's the largest settlement any prosecution has ever reached with Endo Pharmaceuticals, but it's a big difference from the, I think, $2.4 billion that the prosecutors were originally asking for. So the question is, what does Baby Doe, Endo Pharmaceuticals, and the opioid epidemic have to do with Summer Wells, Don, and the 53 days and counting since Summer disappeared? Possibly nothing. Also, possibly everything. Before we get to today's episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. You can click on the light blue icon on the bottom right of your screen. Like, share, leave a comment. If comments are disabled, head on to Twitter using the hashtag SummerWells. And let's get started. So once again, if we choose a global perspective for the Summer Wells case and decide to step far, far away from the case and get a sense of it, get a sense of the woods from a distance, one of the woods that comes into view is something idiosyncratic to Tennessee. Now, I'm not saying it's not prevalent elsewhere in America, just that it's especially bad in Tennessee. And I'm guessing in rural drug corridors all across eastern Tennessee. Well, what about the Beach Creek area and Ben Hill Road specifically? Could the epidemic have found its way there? Well, according to ruralhealthinfo.org, factors contributing to substance use in rural America include low educational attainment, poverty, unemployment, lack of access to mental health care, and isolation. It goes on to say substance use disorders can result in increased illegal activities as well as physical and social health consequences. So, how many of these factors do you think could be applicable here? Poverty, unemployment, low educational attainment, lack of access to mental health care, isolation. Now, if we go to the Brookings Institute, it provides the following information also in this regard. Quote, the US boasts more opioids per capita than any other country in the world. These deaths of despair are most prevalent in the American heartland, in places where manufacturing and other blue-collar jobs have disappeared. Now, I don't know about you. Would you describe Tennessee as part of the American heartland? And do you think despair, economic hardship, and unemployment are a factor in this case? I mean, do you think they're a small factor or a medium factor or a huge factor? I mean, does Grandma have a job? What about Candace? Even David Dodson, living around the corner, said he hasn't been working for a year. Was Don really working on the day Summer disappeared? Consider the scenario where Don called Candace when she was picking up Grandma's prescription from Walgreens. Was Don calling for some random reason, or did Don have a special interest in the prescription? Once again, just as it's important to know whether Summer could swim or not, we also want to know what sort of pain medication was Grandma getting on June the 15th. Now, if you look at what appears to be heat maps of the continental USA, you can see in the east, that's on the right-hand side, a flaring like a flame where the opioid epidemic is burning especially harshly. Can you see that? Well, isn't that furnace of addiction slap bang in the middle of Tennessee? Thus far in the Wells case, we've crossed paths with a couple of substances, if only just in passing. What were they? Well, we've heard about alcohol, vapes, marijuana, and meth. What about opioids? They're cheap, they're effective, they're extremely addictive, and best of all, you can get some of it for free under certain circumstances. In 2017, when the Baby Doe case made headlines, almost 50,000 Americans died directly of opioid overdose. Interestingly, it took 4 years for the case to go to trial, during which time 2 of the 3 companies mentioned in the suit declared bankruptcy. And then days before jury selection, Endo offered a settlement, meaning they gave themselves an out to avoid addressing charges in court. Now, if opiates are relevant to the Summer Wells case, how might they be relevant? Well, besides grandma's prescription, they could be part of the cocktail of preferred substances some of Summer's family members may have been addicted to. It's also possible Summer herself could have been given one of these substances or gotten her hands on them, mistaking pills for candy. Given how frequently Americans overdose accidentally on opiates, it's possible something like that may have played into Summer's accident. And now we go into the area of intertextuality. Are there any pertinent intertextualities in this area, this particular area of opiates? Well, in the Watts case, as early as January 2019, and again in March 2019, I highlighted on Crime Rocket the importance of an obscure Google search retrieved off Chris Watts' phone that was found in the discovery. This was actually brought to my attention by someone commenting on crimerocket.com, and sure enough, on discovery page 1768 was this obscure Google reference to 80 milligrams of oxycodone, right? So a theory was presented in this particular post that oxycodone, as a classic treatment for lupus, may have been used as a murder weapon. It seemed far-fetched at the time, and the time was January 2019. It was basically 2 months after the sentencing hearing and 2 or 3 months after Chris Watts had been tried and sentenced, not tried in court, but sentenced in court. And so no one really paid too much attention to that. That was until about 9 months later, when Sherilyn Cadle broke the news that Watts himself had referred to using oxy twice on Shanann in a letter that he wrote to her. And this letter was provided to, I think, the Daily Mail. That came out in October 2019, as I say, more than 9 months later, when Cadle published Watts's letter specifically referring to oxy. Watts then clarified to me verbally in a call that was recorded from prison where he obtained the oxy from, and that was in order to sort of clear the names or the rumors, speculation around his family members, in order to stave off rumors that he may have gotten it from another family member. So, and this was widely reported, it sort of made national news. Interestingly, neither Cadle nor Scott Reich, who interviewed her in October, seemed to even be aware of the oxy prior to Watts telling Cadle about it in October 2019. But it had actually been in the discovery all along, for almost a year actually at that point. The point is that oxy is well known as a lethal chemical, a potentially lethal chemical. And if you wanted to know whether there was a murder weapon somewhere inside 2825 Saratoga Trail, well, there was. In the same way that there's a murder weapon or a something that can cause accidental death in homes throughout America. There's also a similar scenario, just with a different chemical in the Casey Anthony case. You might think that chemical might be Xanax, but according to Google searches in that case, it was chloroform. And there's a fascinating but much overlooked article, I think it's in TechCrunch or something like that. I'll put a link to that in the description, where it refers to Casey or somebody Googling for foolproof suffocation on Casey Anthony's computer on the day that Caylee disappeared. That's quite crucial. It's one thing to Google that, it's another on the day that she disappeared. And there's a quote from that article. A jury might not have acquitted Casey Anthony of the drowning death of her daughter, and even in this area, there's certainly a almost a symbolic or broad similarity, this idea of drowning in that case as well, of her daughter, if they knew she Googled foolproof suffocation. On the last day, little Caylee was seen alive. It's the latest example of Google search history becoming evidence in a murder case. But this time, the digital footprints were found too late, and the suspect has already been set free. Are police paying enough attention to browser breadcrumbs? During the trial, the prosecution's experts also testified that the Anthony family computer had been used to Google words and phrases including chloroform, chest trauma, internal bleeding, how to make chloroform, neck breaking. But this last week, Orlando's WKMG TV station reported that police had overlooked a key piece of evidence. Someone had Google searched foolproof suffocation from the Anthony's family computer on June 16th, the day Caylee disappeared. And that's the end of the quoted article. So in conclusion, the question remains whether substances played a role in the schema of the Wells case. Well, I think it's crazy to imagine they didn't. But if the question is which substances, the Woods tells us that opiates were likely part of the fabric, particularly in that neck of the woods. Does that make sense? These substances could have compromised someone who was in charge of Summer, or Summer herself, or both. Time will tell how relevant opiates are in this case, but I'm making an early call to say they'll be relevant in some way or another, perhaps more significant than anyone has imagined until now. So I'm not going to take it further than that, although we will be talking in a little bit more detail on this topic in tomorrow's live. That'll be at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Stephanie certainly has something to contribute in this area, but I'll let her sort of take the floor and explain how and why and what. And we'll also have Bria tuning in from France, talking about some of the areas that she knows a little bit about. So that should be a really interesting discussion. I also want to talk a little bit about where Don responds to the question about what should happen to the person involved. So we're going to touch on that as well. So until then, until tomorrow, thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.